The Lakers are an astounding 21-3, which means that they could go 500 over these last 58 games and they would still win 50 games this season, to put in perspective just how dominant they've been. And the man who's been taking this team to the next level has been Anthony Davis. He has somehow been able to maintain his remarkable defensive performance, but lately he's really turned it up a notch on the offensive end. I was fortunate enough to be in the building. It was my first in-person Laker game this year to watch AD drop a 50-piece on Karl Anthony Towns, much to the delight of my Timberwolf-hating girlfriend, Jeannie, who was also there.
You should go to every game, Pete. Go to every game.
Hey, if we can make this happen collectively, I would, I'd be all about it. Yeah, man, he is... in person, he moves like he's 6'4", 6'5". He's super coordinated. He kind of reminds me of like one of those old school centers, or like Tim Duncan was very like, oh, you're on my right shoulder, I'll shoot a lefty hook, right? And so everything was very simple because he had every tool in his bag. And so watching AD do that while running the court, while just wrecking shop on the defensive end, just really unbelievable. But I want to talk about the offensive end of the court. He dropped 50. He had a 39-point game recently. He's breached 40 a couple of times. But lately, he is more and more efficient. He went 20 for 29.
Yeah.
Who hits 20 shots in a game, man?
He had 16 baskets in the paint, right? Like, there's this idea of, I think the plays that are easiest to remember for me aren't necessarily always the ones that you just talked about, right? Like, oh, look at AD. He's 20 feet out. He dribbled between his legs a couple times, and then he sidestepped left and shot a 20-foot jumper, and like he buried it, right? Like, those are real guard skill plays, right? You could tell over the last 3 or 4 years that he's really honed in on those perimeter skills that he was born with, right? Or grew up with, because he had that crazy growth spurt when he was in high school. You could tell that, and you had that great video about this before the season started, about the insane guard skills of Anthony Davis. But those plays are always great. They sort of remind you of this otherworldly skill that he has, but you're 100% right when the efficiency in terms of how he's getting to spots on the floor, like 15, 12 feet in, has really been fantastic. And he is beating smaller defenders, just shooting over the top of them. He's getting a shoulder in to those guys and just finishing over the top, right? But against bigger guys, he is setting them up with classic post footwork moves.
It's cool to watch.
Like triple threat, jab step, hard dribble, drop step, right? Left shoulder, jump hook, right shoulder, turn and fade. Jab step into you off of a turn and face. Quick crossover right to left, going up in to that half Dirk fade, half runner that he shoots. He's got this arsenal of offensive moves and this just amazing soft release from so high that it's really impossible to block. And he's just scoring in ways that you had said this before the season, like, oh, Anthony Davis, like, he's a guy who could get you 40 points and make it look super easy. I'm wondering, since you had some decent seats last night, I'm wondering what it looked like from the level that you got to watch it at. Because I know a lot of times you're like, oh, I've got camera angles, right? I've got the game tape, or you're like kind of like where the scouts sit, right? Like from media row. And that's a different vantage point. But from the floor or near the floor, you see something different. So talk us through right now some of the stuff that you're seeing that makes it so like, damn, that's really unstoppable.
Yeah, it's hard to put into words. That every limb of his is in sync in a way that is very unusual for a guy his size. He reminds me a little bit of James Worthy. I know a lot of our listeners are not old enough to remember Big Game, but remember James would have that like drive, baseline, spin back middle, and it was just all this very fluid, symphonic, like ballerina, like all these like very graceful words come to mind.
Worthy was also one of those first guys from the post, especially, where he was primarily a post player, but a turn and face post player. Like, you didn't see a lot of that, right? Like, a lot of the post play guys that we saw during the 80s were sort of back you down, power move, like up and under type guys. And Worthy had those moves as well, but Worthy's a great comparison, especially for that driving left sort of fading jumper that Worthy would shoot. Worthy was only 6'9", though. Davis is 6'11", and so it's
with the
just a different level.
That exceeds that, right? Like he's got those moves in a center's body, really. And it's remarkable. So in some ways he can be knocked off balance by contact. That's one thing that I am seeing different than earlier in the season that I noticed in person is that he's turning into guys that he has a size advantage over. And as a shorter guy myself, I always knew when I was matched up with a guy that was bigger than me, then they would try to post me up. I'd want to get into his body, right? Make him uncomfortable. And that's, those shots to the ribs. He had a rib issue earlier that made me wonder if like, hey, I'd rather take this like fadeaway 17-footer than this like step through 10-footer that's going to be a better shot. But in person, he is so on balance by and large and so fluid. His hand-eye coordination is what